Hi, this is Dr. Karen Wilson Starks, your host for the Voice of Leadership and for Dr. Karen Speaks on Leadership. And in today's show, I'm going to be talking about a number of odds and ends in life from which we can derive some value and benefit if we reflect on these odds and ends and extract the relevant lessons. So let me get started sharing a little bit from these experiences. There was one day recently when I was on a business trip and my husband was with me, and we were driving a rental car, and we had to drive a long distance for me to get to the work site. And in this particular case, it was one night I had worked pretty late, and it was late. We both were tired, and the rental car that we had was doing all kinds of tricks. The car windows were fogging up, and it was really difficult to see. We had to constantly lower the windows and continue to run the windshield wiper, even though it wasn't raining, and no one else's car seemed to be having this problem. We were in a very humid area, and the fogger just wasn't working the way that it probably should have been working. Well, this was incredibly annoying, and it took a lot of time and a lot of focus. Now, before that happened, we had parked the car in a parking lot when we had to make a stop. And when we got ready to leave, the car would not go into reverse. And this was the first time that this had happened with the rental car. We'd been driving for days, had not run into this problem, but suddenly it would not go into reverse no matter what we did in order to get out of the parking lot. So at that point, my husband got out, he looked around, and he saw from this computer screen in the car that maybe something was affecting the seat belts in the back seat. Now, nothing was really on the back seat, but sometimes if you put something on the back seat, the car thinks you need to put a seat belt around it, but there was nothing there. Nevertheless, he found out that he had to close the seat belts anyway and lock them in the back seat in order for the car to move into reverse. So this was unusual and just bizarre behavior. Now, as we were going down the street, all of a sudden he says, something's wrong with these headlights and I really can't see. And I thought, well, that's odd and that's strange. And so it was a lighted area, so it was hard to completely tell. And we were about to get on the highway. So I said, well, I think you better pull over and get to a place that's not the highway so that we can look at it and see what's going on. And when he did that, sure enough, the headlights weren't on. And so how did that happen? And then we remembered we had had valet parking, and therefore the valet probably had turned off the automatic. So now these are several problems so far. You've got the car that won't go with reverse. We have to put on the seatbelt. There are the car windows that are fogging up, and we have to run the windshield wiper, even though it's not raining, and all of this is going on. And now there are no headlights, and we finally get that problem addressed. And so we're continuing our journey and driving this long distance from the work site back to the hotel. Now, around about this time, I started to get a little tired, yet I knew that I really needed to stay awake to help my husband stay awake because it had been a long and early starting day. So, right about that time, I contracted the hiccups. And the hiccups are just a horrible experience for me. There's no way in life I can sleep with the hiccups, and they do keep me awake. So I had the hiccups all the way back to the hotel, and that's how it was. Now, upon reflection, I was thinking about this, and I said, you know what? All of these inconveniences are probably God's way of keeping us alive because we're driving late at night in a foreign area, a long distance, and we're both really exhausted. So sometimes there are those inconveniences that happen. It could be a travel delay that you're experiencing, and you don't know what missed accident you have escaped because you had a delay. And there are times when these inconveniences, as annoying as they are truly for your benefit if you stop, reflect, and think about how they could be for your benefit. And even on the business end, maybe there's a client that you didn't materialize in your world, And perhaps that was a blessing too. Maybe something better was coming down the pike the very next day. And if you had been tied up with this non preferred situation, you wouldn't have been able to take advantage of the true opportunity that God was sending. So that's a possibility of what could be happening with inconveniences. We're spared from something dangerous, or God is holding us out for something better. So that's Exhibit A in odds and ends. Now, Exhibit B in odds and ends is really about thinking ahead in client interactions and thinking about the long game. I was in a place recently where I went to this location because I wanted to purchase something of value for my business, and it was a service. And in this particular place, they had a number of very aggressive salespeople, and the salespeople pounce on you and ask all kinds of intrusive questions and do a whole lot of things before they properly and truly establish a relationship. Well, I was very offended by all of this and didn't want to have anything to do with it. And so I kind of like closed down and was like, okay, now trust has been broken. I'm really not as enthused about doing business with you as I was before I walked in the door. So realizing that they had made a huge error, the two salesmen who were trying to help me, they decided that they better do something to make this situation work out better. And so they created an atmosphere where they brought me flowers, they brought me candy, and they wrote me a personal note and all of these things to sort of, I called it a peace offering. Now, the peace offering was important in this case because they were trying to reestablish the broken trust. And when I think about how this happens in business, remember you are building a relationship with other people. And that relationship takes time. Doesn't mean it has to take forever or the rest of your life necessarily, although you do want to keep and cultivate great relationships for the long haul. I think what happened in this case is they were moving much too quickly for the situation. And you want to mirror the client that you are working with or the prospect that you're working with. If they're more of a slow burner type, you might adapt more of that pace. If they're a fast burner, adapt more of a fast pace. And you can move things along somewhat, but not until you establish relationship and trust and show an interest in that other person for whatever your product and service is. Listen long enough to find out how you could benefit them. Listen long enough to find out what they really want and what they're looking for. Don't just be in a hurry to sell anything you have in your portfolio that might not fit what that person needs at the time or what they're looking for. Now, with the peace offering, I decided, these weren't really bad guys. They just used an inappropriate approach. And so ultimately, I did do some business with them and I purchased a service for my business. Now, what if they had approached this from a relationship direction right from the beginning? Maybe I would have bought a bigger service. Perhaps we would have gotten there sooner or a whole lot of other possibilities. But once you show yourself to be dangerous, in a sense, to your prospective paying client, then the shields, at least in my case, I put the shields up, I put the guards up, and something said, hold on to your purse because you might be in enemy territory. Well, you don't want your client saying that about you or even thinking that about you. You want to do what they ultimately did in the end, which was to be memorable. And they're memorable enough. Yeah, I would do business with them again, of course. And they did get my attention because they were paying attention to what kind of person I am. And those of you who know me and have seen me around for a while, you know I love flowers. I'm always wearing flowers in my hair, on my clothing, or whatever. And so that did, in fact, get my attention. I would also say it's important to pass the sunshine forward. So when I left out of the region where I was and I couldn't take the flowers with me, I said, I'm going to give this as a gift to the people at the front desk. And it was interesting because when I went down there, before I even presented the flowers to them, they thanked me for bringing rays of sunshine to the hotel every day the whole week that I had been there. They said whenever I walked into the room, I was bringing something colorful, a spirit of positivity, and they just enjoyed it. I said, well, that's amazing. I said, thank you. I have some more sunshine to share with you today. And I said, let these remind you of this week of shared sunshine. And they were delighted because the flowers were absolutely beautiful and gorgeous. And sitting on the front desk, it really spruced up the environment in a great way. So whenever you can, pass the sunshine on to others as well. The next little vignette in Odds and Ends today is really about ingenuity, creativity, and persistence in the midst of a dilemma. So this dilemma was that my husband and I were arriving into an East Coast city, into an airport we'd been to multiple times before, and we were going to a hotel that we had been to before. So it seemed simple. The hotel was close to the airport and so on. However, when we got the rental car and we turned on our phones to try to get the GPS location to the hotel, we didn't have cell coverage. And we thought, well, it's no problem. It's probably because we're in the rental car garage. So let's wait until we get outside the garage. We did that. His phone still didn't work. My phone didn't work. And now it's like, now what are we going to do? Because as many times as we had been there before, I had absolutely no clue how to get to that hotel, and neither did my husband. I knew the area well enough to know we couldn't go too far or we'd be off the beaten trail. And as we were driving around trying to see something that looked familiar and where we might be able to remember how to get to the hotel, which was doubtful because it was a difficult route and I truly couldn't remember it, even though it was close. While we were doing all of that, there are three major freeways in the area. I knew we didn't want to get on those because you didn't have to get on the freeway. And every place we turned, everywhere we went, was trying to put us on one of these freeways. And it's dark, it's late at night, there's not a lot of lighting in the area. I said, whatever you do not get on the freeway because I might not know how to get us back off to get back here to where we were. So I said, let's try to find a gas station. We had not run into any gas stations, hadn't seen any, and we still didn't see any gas stations as we were wandering around in that general vicinity. Because I thought if we got to a gas station, they would know how to tell us how to get to this hotel because it was very close to the airport. That didn't work. So then I said, well, we're going to have to pull over and think of something because we can't run the risk of ending up on the highway inadvertently. So we pulled over into a housing complex and I said, okay, even though the internet is not working, maybe the phone is working. So I was able to pull up my email, which included the reservation for the hotel. So I at least have the phone number there. And then I tried to dial the phone number. And that's when I discovered that not only was the internet out, also the phone service was out and we couldn't make phone calls. So that also was a closed off door and that didn't work. So then I said, what else can I do? Hi, it's Dr. Karen here, reminding you that change is very challenging and difficult, even under the best of circumstances. If you are going through an organizational change, it goes better when you know the steps, the order of the steps, and what to do. So contact me to walk through what will work best for your organization. I can be reached at Dr. Period Karen, Karen at transleadership.com. And then I remembered that my computer case was in the back seat right behind us and that I had a mobile hotspot and maybe I could get that to work and to connect to our phones because it was a different service than what our telephones ran on. So I pulled out the hotspot and even though I had the password and everything, it would not work. And I said, well, I know that the hotspot works if I have the laptop up. So I took the computer out. This was a lot of machinations trying to get the computer out in the car with all this luggage. But I got the computer out and managed to get it turned on and connected the computer to the hotspot. And then it connected to my phone as well. So I was able to bring up the navigation, and I also connected my husband's phone to it as well. So we managed to get to the hotel safely because of thinking a little outside the box, being persistent, being creative, not giving up, and looking at, well, what do I have that I could possibly use? Now, if that didn't work, I'm not sure what I would have tried next, but at least that's as far as we got on that. So you want to be thinking about a number of things with this. You want to consider multiple options when you're stuck in a situation that's unusual and you're trying to get out of it. You want to remain flexible because the answer may come from a direction you're not thinking about. And I then also remembered that way back in the past, I used to always carry paper copy directions to the hotel from the airport. And it had been years since I had done it because it wasn't necessary. I had never had an outage like that in the middle of trying to navigate and go someplace. So this was a new experience after a number of years. Well, I decided that I would rebuild back into the business these redundancies so that this would not happen again, that I would always have a paper copy and could follow the paper instructions and map to get to the hotel in a similar situation. The next exhibit, an odds and ends, is about a hotel arrival. On this particular occasion, we arrived at our hotel and the type of room that we had booked was unavailable. Now, that might normally be a cause for concern, except the hotel staff said that they were upgrading us to a more spacious room, which I loved because this bigger room had two bathrooms in it, two full baths, which was phenomenal. My husband and I would each have our own separate bathrooms, and I thought, yeah, that's really good. Now, when we got to that room, there were a number of deficiencies and other problems there. There were some issues. It was not perfect, it was imperfect. And I started thinking about the trade offs that we make in life. This was a much better room than the one that we had booked in terms of style and general amenities. The things that were inconvenient and problematic over time could be fixed and addressed, just not addressed that night that we were checking in. And so, what I say is sometimes to get some of the things that you want or to enjoy a benefit, you do have to engage in a trade off. Maybe take something else about it that's not as convenient as you would want it to be. However, it's worth it in the end because you're still getting more value than what you would have been getting before. And so that's what we opted to do in that circumstance. I sort of think about all of these odds and ends, and I just want to summarize some of the lessons out of this. Number one is be flexible and be agile because you're going to have to move. You're going to have to go in a different direction than what you were thinking about. Number two, be creative. Find alternative ways. There are alternative ways, even if they're not the ways that you are accustomed to using or what you usually use. Thirdly, I would say create redundancies so that you have more than one way to get something done. You're not totally dependent on any one way, any one technology, any one person. And when I think about the business context, so many times there are people who leave businesses and they carry out the door a whole wealth of intellectual property and knowledge in their heads that no one else knows. So you want to create redundancies in your business so that more than one person knows how to do these critical roles and tasks. And if someone leaves, you are not left in a precarious situation because no one else knows how to do what that person was able to do. So you want to create redundancies and have the benefit from that. And then fourthly, as I said, just remembering to pass the positives forward. I recall that I was in an airport recently and I had on an armband that said, be positive and no negativity allowed. And I was in this retail store in the airport, and the clerk in that store looked like he was kind of having a bad day. He was sort of looking a little on the depressed side or a little sullen in some way. He saw the armband and he said, yeah, that's right. That's exactly what I'm going to do. I am going to be positive. And I said, yeah, be positive. That's a good thing. And so, again, that was a little ray of sunshine to share with him because he needed some sunshine that day. So look around. There are lots of opportunities to be the sunshine in someone's life on any given day. In fact, one of the things my sister always calls me, she calls me a welcome light because I will bring that welcoming light and positivity to the people around me. And they often will comment on it and say something about it or derive some benefit and share the fact that they're glad that they ran into me that day because of the positivity that they experienced. And the number five, as a reminder, would be to play for the long game. You don't have to do everything right in this 1 second or even in this one day. Rome was not built in a day. Take your time, get to know people, and remember you're cultivating relationships for your business for the long term. And you want those relationships to be close, connected, and trusting. And you don't want to do anything to violate that trust by moving too quickly and getting the cart before the horse, if you will. So plan for the long game. Plan to keep that client for a long time because you treat them well as people of value and you're moving at a pace that is consistent with what works for them. And then sixth, I would say, remember to identify how an inconvenience can possibly work for you, be in your favor, be for your benefit. So when the inconvenience comes, like a car that won't shift into reverse, like a car that seems to be dim of the headlights, or any of these things, all of these defrosting problems, what's the bigger picture? How might these be working together for your good? And I'm convinced that God used all of that to keep us both awake in a very difficult scenario. Which brings me to point number 7, which is remember that God has got you covered. You are not alone. And he is making sure that you get safely to whatever your destination is, whether we're talking about actual travel or just you in business, getting to the place where you want to be. So we have to remember that God is the one who's ultimately working for our well-being. And it certainly brings to mind Romans 8:28 about all things working together for good to those who love God and are called according to his purposes. So today, as we are closing this short segment on odds and ends, I want to read 2 verses that are the heart of the trans leadership business. And that's Romans 12:1 and 2. And verse 2 in particular, it's the theme verse. It is the core verse of my company, Trans Leadership, which stands for Leadership Transformations, and it's based on Romans 12:2. So starting with Romans 12:1, the scripture says, I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Now, what I see in this is Jesus Christ made the ultimate sacrifice for us in that he died, gave up his life, and died on a cross. What he asked us to do is to give up our lives as a living sacrifice, not a dead sacrifice, because this is holy, this is acceptable to God, and it's our reasonable service. If someone gives up their life for you, we can give up our lives to them in a different way, not physically as in death, however, spiritually as in our connection, our dedication, our commitment to living out the purposes of God that He has placed in us and for our lives. And it goes on to say, don't be conformed. Don't be conformed to what everybody else is doing around you and to the world, but be transformed. And it says, by the renewing of your mind. That means even in a tough situation, you have to say to your mind, I know that there is opportunity in this situation. I know that there is a way through this, even if I don't know what it is now, even if I can't see it. I'm going to find it. I'm going to find the path through the jungle that's out here. And it's a mindset change. It's saying that God has given me creativity. God has given me innovation. I am able to work this out. I'm able to do this in a different way. And when we do shift our minds, shift our perspectives, then we can prove out what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. And remember, He will bring to your mind those things which you didn't think about before, didn't know you needed to think about. However, you need to know these things and think about them now in your current circumstances and situation. So just remember to trust God, who's leading you through the maze, and He knows how to get through from one side to the other. So you are in good hands. So thank you so much for being with me today. And I hope that you will derive something, that you've derived something of value and benefit from today's odds and ends, a perspective, a way of thinking about life so that no matter what happens, you can craft a pathway forward with the help of God. See you next time. Hi, it's Dr. Karen here, and I want to tell you about my book, which is called Lead Yourself First, the Senior Leader's Guide to Engaging Your People for Greater Performance and Impact. It's a book to inspire you about the challenges that you have overcome and the vision that you've realized in your life. It's from these struggles, triumphs, and temporary setbacks that others will be inspired and that they will have the courage to lead themselves first and also to lead others. In the first chapter, which is called Envision the Future, I talk about the rocky education path that I had to forge and overcome to realize my vision to become a psychologist. And that was all the way from elementary school straight through graduate school. There were obstacles. The path wasn't easy. And yet, entering graduate school with only $30 in the bank, I ended up finishing graduate school with no debts. When you walk step by step in the vision, even when it doesn't look like where you want to be, doors open and resources come to you because you hold the vision and you keep walking. So here's what I wanted to say to you. Lead yourself first. This book will walk you through your journey as you go through the open doors and as you continue to walk, just like I walked through mine. So get your copy of Lead Yourself First. Hold the vision for yourself and your life and be successful. You've been listening to The Voice of Leadership with me, Dr. Karen Wilson Starks. And I want to give a special thanks to jazz saxophonist Ron McMillan for granting us permission to use his gifted music on our show. Thanks for listening. And remember to go to my website, TRANSLEADERSHIP.com, for more strategies, insights, and leadership resources.